All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Parent Forum. The first topic on the agenda is report cards. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the report cards?
How long have the report cards been the way they are? There's no letter grades, there's no number grades. It's, I only have a second grade report card to look at. I'm not unhappy with that second grade report card. It's for first and second grade, but I'd like to know, does it go third and fourth, fifth and sixth? What's the steps for the report cards?
Would you like me to answer that, Mr. Ryan?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, when I first came in, this is my end of my second year, when I came in July 1, 2013, I came in after a year of work at the school to develop a competency-based report card, which was the direction of the previous board, to the school with the administration, to develop a report card that began to look like Spalding. Spalding had gone into a competency-based report card system. So the staff, in my understanding, had spent that year looking at the report card to develop it based on, to look similar to our kneecap. So proficient with distinction, proficient, partially proficient, substantially below proficient. So when you say you don't see a letter grade or a number grade, it's now based on, again, some of our students are based on that kneecap style of grading. So again, looking more at competency or where the student is in regard to those standards. So is the student currently proficient with that standard? That make sense? Okay.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure before I get moving too fast and coming back to it. So making sure that students are proficient rather than saying they got an A, we're saying they're proficient. And if they're not yet proficient, they have that opportunity to become proficient. So that they don't have to, it's not a time frame that they have 3 months to understand this math concept. And that if they don't get it, well, they get an F, or they did really well, they got an A, and they fail. They have that opportunity to come back, because we've known for years that students all learn at different levels and different speeds, and we want to honor that and say, okay, at some point, the student's going to become proficient, hopefully, and they have that opportunity to demonstrate that. So if they get a partially proficient in quarter 1, we can go back and change that in quarter 2 and say, they get it now, and we can change that to proficient. Somewhere along in the report card also, you'll see that it's not yet assessed, because all the standards are on the report card for the entire year. So when they get to that, they may not have addressed that standard in the first quarter. They may address it in the second quarter or the third quarter, and we look at that also. So it started as a trial. We did that with K1, 2, I think it was just K1, and then 7 and 8. And we decided, when Mr. Tercy came in, took a look at it and said, we really don't see that we have a curriculum, an established curriculum, to base our competencies on. So we said, let's put a hold on going any further. Again, our expectation was we're going to go the K1, 7, 8, 2, 3, 5, 6, and eventually have the whole school on a competency-based report card system. When we took a look at the curriculum and saying it's tough to have competencies without having a curriculum we can base that on. So we put it on hold, but not wanting to go backwards, knowing that our progress was we want to be a competency-based school. Let's put it on hold for right now, but not go backward. And looking at developing the curriculum so we can bring the entire school up to speed on a competency-based report card. Yes, ma'am.
How much of that is based on a number grade? I find that in the beginning of the year, my daughter will get, and I only have a second grade to look at as well, but my daughter will get, let's say, 2s, even though she's getting 100s on all her homework that's coming home and all the quizzes.
Yeah.
And then magically by the end of the year, she's getting all 1s.
Yeah.
The same grades.
Same.
And I think it was explained to me at one point, and I tried to catch on to this because I'm used to the age differences, that if they hadn't reached a certain point in the classroom learning something, then she couldn't get a 1 because they hadn't reached that point yet. And that confuses me, because if she's been taught a certain amount of information and she has mastered it, she should have a 1, whether it's the first day of school, the first marking period, or if it's the last one. Am I missing something on that?
I think, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but is it that she ended up getting the?
Is it based on testing, on a number grade? So if they do a test, I know testing. And
Sure, it's some kind of assessment. There's all kinds of assessments. We do our standardized assessments, we do our in-class assessments, we do, as we were just talking about, quality performance assessments, and different ways of assessing different students based on what their needs are. I think, one question came up today, I had a coffee with the principal this morning. One of the questions that came up was how did my student go from being a proficient on counting from 1 to 100 on, the first marking period, and then the second marking period, they may not be proficient. Did they lose something? Did they forget something? Did they have a bad assessment? And I think those are the things we have to, as we kind of go through this whole system, how we figure out how we mark our students best. And again, the question being, can my student go down in proficiency? And they probably can if they forget something. One of the ideas about competency is they probably don't lose mastery. Once we get something, we all know how, once we leave school, we probably all remember how to count from 1 to 100. We remember how to do basic math. If we don't use it a lot, like algebra, we get a little nervous when it comes to algebra as adults if we're not comfortable with that. So there may be some times they go down at proficiency.
But I guess, and that's not what I'm asking.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I'm probably clear. How subjective is the grading on the report card is my question. Because I feel that explanations have been given to me that say, well, yep, she's getting 100, so she's getting, but we haven't taught this yet, so she can't.
I think you find that most teachers throughout the year are using rubrics to assess students. They have to show proficiency. Again, we'll say counting from 1 to 100. They have to get it so many times before we mark them as proficient. And that would be a rubric that should be used pretty consistently throughout the students and throughout the class. Is my expectation. I don't look at every student's rubric and how they do it, but that would be the expectation. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Sir.
Well,
Has it become a reality that Spalding is adopted this type of grading system?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right.
For years.
Yeah.
Do we maybe have a staff that might be willing to speak to those numbers and just give us a rough explanation of how those work so that the parents that are here can understand that?
I was on the report card committee when it all started, and getting used to, I think the problem, or sometimes parents don't understand, is we're not giving an A, B, C, D, F anymore. And especially in younger grades, I find, and I've had this discussion with Jerry several times, is, what the competencies are for first graders and second graders are a lot different than what competencies are for 7th and 8th graders, where they can sit down and take a test. And, first quarter of first grade, getting a first grader to take a reading test it's not gonna happen. So I understand, we've had the conversations. I understand the confusion, and I think that a lot of parents don't understand it because we still are, we're sending home our progress reports with Ps, PDs, PBs, SVPs. And I actually had 2 progress reports come back today that at the top the parent put an A, a B, a C, and a D. And I immediately went and made the phone call that that's not what that means. And if your child's getting a partially proficient in the 3rd quarter, let's say they're not being assessed 1st and 2nd quarter. So in the 3rd quarter, if they're getting a partially proficient, and you're thinking, well, what, at home they can make predictions, give outcomes and whatever, in science, whatever it may be, we don't just assess them once and we're done. It goes across the quarter. So at the time, if it's a 2nd quarter rolling into 3rd quarter, they're just freshly being introduced to it. And they're not proficient yet. So for me to say, your child's proficient in this, but they're not showing it throughout in all areas.
That's what we talked about before, that's where I'm
Sure.
coming in, that I think what you're saying is, I can't say she's proficient because she hasn't been taught that, but that's not a good tool for a parent at home to say, she's getting it, I don't need to look first or help.
Not because she hasn't been taught that, because she hasn't used it or shown us that she can, he or she hasn't shown us that they used it enough throughout the quarter to say they are proficient in this. You know, a partially proficient, in my opinion, for kids, it's not a bad grade. And I think that's what the hard thing is for a lot of parents. They're trying to put this new way of grading with an A, B, C, D, but it's not. So for me to say to a parent, your child's partially proficient in reading fluently, that's because they can't sit down, open a grade 1 text and get it fluently, which they shouldn't be able to. They're in first grade. So they're gonna, you know, we won't be doing our job if we're not teaching them what the next step and what the next step is. So I understand what you're saying, and it's kind of, it's hard to explain that.
I'm following you, I just don't feel like it's a good tool this way for parents. You know, parents are supposed to be involved in their child's education, and if the report card, the reporting that's coming back is so confusing that you don't feel like you're getting an idea of where your child is in the grading system, it's not really a good tool.
And I think part of the problem that you know, we met when we rolled this out in first grade with our first grade teachers, in kindergarten met at parent meetings with parents, and we explained to them, and we gave them the booklet that explained it, and the wording in it is pretty specific as to what the P means, what the PD means, what the PP means. And again, I think it's a hard transition to get from the letter grade to the proficient.
And I think if the only time you're hearing from the teacher is when you get that grading report, it would be very confusing. So if that's the only time you're having the conversation with the teacher, my expectation would be the teacher's going to be talking with you throughout the year, and if there are issues going on with partially proficient, that you would be hearing that.
Yeah, but I don't want to wait for issues.
No, I'm saying, my point being is, if that's the only time you're hearing from the teacher, of course it's going to be confusing, and for me that's an issue. That's going to be a problem, and I want the teacher to have more communication with you.
Now, would the parents within the audience feel it would be advantageous to have kind of like a refresher for the report cards? One, when you start the kindergarten process, but every year, is it important that we bring you all in for a refresher and say, please remember that this is what the report card is, this is how it's graded? I don't know if we do that on an annual basis or if they do it teacher by teacher. So someone new moving into the district that maybe missed the kindergarten and first grade might be still confused.
I think it's a good point, Bonnie. You know, when we rolled this out last year, we had a parent meeting down in the middle school again, and to just kind of explain what a competency-based report card was going to look like, what you could expect, what it meant. The PD, you know, proficient with distinction, was not the new way, but really it meant something completely different. And partially proficient wasn't the new C. It means they're not quite there yet, but we expect them to be.
I guess I would find that confusing as a parent too, because I would be the one, and in high school I don't get a journal anymore, my kids are all in high school, but I remember that I used that journal or the agenda that the kids had that they brought home every day, and I hope that they still do that. Do they still do? The communication that was in that agenda was like vital, because I would write my questions and concerns in that and say, you know, initial this twice and circle it in red if you've seen this for me, you know, because I needed to know that they had seen it, because if not, I was going to be texting and calling. And a lot of times, if I see that my kids aren't proficient in something, I want to spend the extra time at the countertop with them before I get the, well, little Jimmy's staying back this year because he didn't get it. Or, you know what I mean? I never want that. And although I see the 100, the 100, the 100, and the A's and the B's, I'm wondering, okay, is it social? Do I need to work on my child socially, or is it academically? Are they writing their letters backwards? Because I see the work, but I guess I would want more clarification as a mom, and you know, and I'm hoping that on the report cards, and I don't have a little one, that you have like a little place where you can write a comment and a concern to a parent about every single thing. And I would say, as a parent, communicate with the teacher as much as you can, and if you drive them nuts, then I guess that goes to show how important your kid's education is. And, you know, be polite and give them maybe a little bit of time to get the question across. And if you still don't have clarity, ask again. And if you have to ask someone else, if you just don't understand, come to us, come to Jerry, go to Michael, go to any of the staff, and we would hope that they would give you an answer to the best of their ability at all times.
I have a, competency-based education, that's mandated under No Child Left Behind?
No, it's not. It's not mandated under No Child Left Behind. It's the direction the state's been going for years, particularly at the high school level and moving down into the middle school and the primary grades as well. I want to be very, very clear that our report card is a standards-based report card, not a competency-based report card. We do not have written competencies currently in Wakefield. We use the standards to report. So there's a difference between the two, because competencies are written based on standards. And what you're seeing on your report card is the actual standards that are being taught too. And that's what they're reporting on. So we would have a long way to go in order to develop competencies and have competency-based education and competency-based reporting. So we're at the standards-based right now. Competency is a whole different ballgame.
Can I see a hand in the back? Go
I
ahead.
just got here, but so I tried that in second grade with my daughter, and we kind of got the booklet. And it was like 12 pages long or something like that. But I'm not necessarily a fan of it. But is that what the school is going for all grades?
We haven't had that
Is it just
discussion at
certain
this
grades
point.
still? 'Cause
I
know
guess
it's
we,
not
I
this
guess we
year.
want your input.
That's the purpose.
You, as townspeople, you elected us,
Yeah.
and we've hired your administration based on our judgments. And one of the reasons we wanted the forum is we want the public to tell us if you like the direction things are going, and if you don't, then we need you to voice your opinion to us, because we can't represent you without you all coming to us as advocates for your own families and saying, this isn't working for me.
Yeah. I had it in second grade, and I didn't necessarily like it. And I don't know, my husband. It was like I liked talking to the teacher and saying, "Oh, you know, Amy's doing a great job and stuff." But as far as like when the report card kind of came home, I just kind of like skimmed over it, and I didn't really like the new setup.
Okay.
What are the other grades using?
Mary, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, but you can go ahead.
Okay,
Go
good.
ahead.
I was wondering, you didn't finish with what the other grades were using.
You just, yeah, again, your typical, your standard, and based on the grading, percentages. The problem with percentages at times is, that if a student doesn't get it in the beginning, and all of a sudden they do get it at the end, which is what we hope at the end of, at the end of the quarter, at the end of a lesson or a project, we want them to get it. But if when we use a percentage base, we're consequencing the child that they didn't get it in the beginning, and all of a sudden they do get it at the end, but we're gonna start grading them based on percentages, which is really, it probably isn't, it's not a great way to assess a child, and we, again, want to honor that progress they've made without consequences because they didn't get it in the beginning.
But isn't that what progress reports are for, is to honor the progress that they've made, so that at the end of the quarter, I would like to say, she needs help here, or she's doing really well here, or she needs to do some more work here. And then, we get those mid-quarter that say, doing excellent, then we know that they've gone up.
And you should be getting more feedback throughout the quarter anyway, with the paper, again, especially at the lower grade levels. The parents typically see that paper that comes home at the end of the week, they get that folder and they see what the child's done all week long. That should be part of that feedback also, as well as the progress report, and then as well as if there's things that you're not thrilled with that you're seeing coming home, making that contact with the teacher.
It's just the opposite for me. We get the hundreds,
Yeah.
and I don't know what else to do with it, because there's nothing on the report card that says 85% here, or, and I understand the difference. It's just, it doesn't sound like a good tool.
What do the teachers think about the new grading? Are they fans?
Well, I'm not a teacher, but you asked for parent input as to what was our grading. I don't have a little one, I have a 7th grader and an 8th grader. And I find the performance grading a lot nicer, because what is science? What are they covering? And by having the standards there, I know whether or not they're working on life science, I know whether or not they're addressing physical science. It's not just this great abyss of science. And it breaks down the standards, and I can see it. And then I think sometimes we want the standards broken down into specific skills, which is not the report card, it's standard. But I know that the teachers have been amazing that when I've emailed and asked what specific skills would that standard entail, they've made it very clear. And then from those skills, we've been able to challenge our kids. So standards can be a little broad, and breaking it down to specific skills within has been really helpful. And rather than, just math, are you working on algebra now, or are you working on geometry? What specifically are you working on? Is it word problems? And it's been really helpful for the older grades.
But the older grades aren't doing well, right? Isn't it K through 2 that are doing
We have
it?
7th and 8th.
Yeah.
We're doing 7th, 3, 6, 7.
Sorry. Yep, go ahead.
That's great to hear, because I have found with contact with parents in the last 2 years of doing this, that when I do have the concerned parents coming to me saying, well, what are you doing in math this quarter? What do they need help on, and what standard are we looking at? You can't put all the standards in a report card. You can't, because we already have a long report card. It would be 10 pages. So we took the standards that were most important and stuck them into math, into science, and into language arts. So when I get an email and say, okay, so I noticed that my son or daughter is having a problem in this area, you can say it's this standard. You can look it up. You can look it up online. They can go to it. They can help with them at home, and they can help at school. Whereas the other report cards of, first of all, grading in kindergarten, first, second grade, A, or maybe just kindergarten first, and A, B, C, or D. What my A in speaking and listening skills might be totally different than my other first grade teacher looking at their speaking and listening skills. So it's kind of a broad spectrum, whereas if we look at the standards, we can say, can this child speak in complete sentences? And when you look at the standards and it's broken down, then it gives you a better sense of what we're working on in that grade. Does that make sense?
And just say, initially, when you first developed your report card, it was all the standards. Every single standard was in there, and it was a 12-page report card, which you don't want to look at. You weren't just leaning over it now. You're using to fan yourself back when you first got it, because it was enormous. And again, we had to cull that down to make it more manageable for any one of us to look at, never mind the people in education.
Mary?
Yes, the problem I have with the proficiency report cards is there is no honor roll. The kids who work hard, they're not being recognized for their hard work at all. If a child is not proficient at the beginning of the quarter and then they finally get proficient, you're not giving them a D. You're giving them, what he earned at the end of the quarter, you're making him proficient. How does that help? You're helping that child not to feel bad, but you're not recognizing the children who go above and do everything, get the A, get the A+.
The effort's not to not make kids feel bad. It's to look at what they've gained in proficiency within that standard. And recognizing that not all students learn at the same level. There are going to be some kids who come into first grade far beyond the literacy skills of your average first grader, and we need to give them more challenging material. So they would already be proficient at that first grade literacy level in several areas probably. And there are other students who are going to come in at the end, and they're going to be at that same, then they're going to be at the end of the first grade level, which is where we want them to be. And so it's not to make them feel good, it's really just honoring the progress they've made.
Yeah, I get, you want to honor the progress, but you're still not doing anything for the children who are further ahead.
Certainly we differentiate within the classroom, and to make sure the kids are being challenged. So the kids who are already proficient, we're taking efforts. may move a child into a given grade level to achieve
Right.
their reading skills. They really need to be, so if they're a first grade and they're reading a second grade level, we'll move them in there.
And is there an honor roll at
No,
all?
No, there's not.
So we're not recognizing the kids.
I think we certainly recognize them within their grade level, within their report card, and saying that they've made proficiency or
Yeah, but
they-
you're proficient, I mean,
with
that's.
distinction.
Sandy?
With the proficiency stuff, like when we did the kneecaps and stuff, and that's when that all first came out, that I remember. If you tested out with distinction, then you could be one of the gifted and talented kids. So to me, that would be like the honor roll, the high honor roll.
Right.
But there's
Yeah,
nothing.
There's nothing, it's
You know what
not
I
a
mean?
program,
There's-
you're saying, Sandy, that, like a gifted and talented program like
Yeah.
they had here in the past.
You could only be on that if you tested out with distinction.
Yeah.
So that was like the big reward to be,
Sure.
you know, but she's an A student, and she just, and I go through her report card too, and I go, okay, that's an A, that's a, I have to go through all the numbers, I have to do a total, and if she gets
You
a
don't
B, I'm
want
like,
that.
when I was a kid, a B was, you know,
Sure.
and they do need that, they do need something that says, hey, you did a great job.
It's kind of recognition.
Yeah, they need something. They used to get the letter from the principal just saying, great job, and, you know, in the Wakefield Weekly in the back, you know, I mean, if they do the spelling bee and everything else, everyday stuff, what's gonna keep them motivated to keep going and going and going, they want to try and harder. When they go, yeah, big deal, proficient. You can't go, I'm an AB student, I'm a proficient student. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's no goal. You know, yeah, I mean, I know I'm old school, I'm like the old mom, but I like the ABs. I still think it's, and it's apples to oranges with proficient and ABC. You can't even.
What do the majority of the
together.
parents feel in the room? Would they prefer to be all AB? Just a
Yeah.
show of hands? Or do you mind the proficient? And does not having that honor roll list affect your children's initial, like, drive?
There needs to be a goal.
Yes.
They're not goal oriented, that's the whole thing in life, right? When you're in a job, you have a goal to get a raise, you have a goal to get a promotion. But if my kid's doing a really great job, what does she end up doing? She ends up helping the kid in class who's not doing a good job.
That bothers me. They
It
should be
bothers
being
me too.
challenged.
And my daughter's spending a lot of her day doing that, and it drives me crazy.
Do you speak to the teacher about that?
I took the first time and I have another meeting set up. First quarter. It doesn't give her a goal.
Mm-mm.
Well,
I think it does affect a child when they've worked hard 3 or 4 years in a row and they're constantly on that honor roll, the high honor roll, and then they become, you know, homogenized into the proficient blend. Based on personal experience, you see a child who's thriving and proud to be on that honor roll. And then when the honor roll disappears, then there's nothing, you know, I mean, my child's not as challenged as I am, but she's not, she no longer has that goal to strive for, the high honors or the honor roll. And I think it may affect more kids than we realize. And kids as individuals need to be able to strive for that higher, the pie in the sky, I guess. So that's my own take on it.
Mary, did you?
Yeah, I was speaking with my children, and I was telling them about not having the honor roll, and they're like, well, what's the point? You know, when they saw their friends and other classmates getting recognized, that they're, you know, it made them want to work harder to get on that honor roll.
Anybody else? Jean?
Spalding has an honor roll, correct?
I'm not sure if they still do or not. I'm not sure.
And this is the new trend across the nation?
It's, yeah, I'm
Or
not-
is this just random places that this is the grading system and no honor rolls?
I don't know what it is.
I wouldn't, I can speak to this. I would say it's not a trend across the nation. Actually, the state of New Hampshire is really leading leading the pack when it comes to competency-based education. However, it's an individual district decision as to whether they go towards a competency-based reporting system or not. So it's a local decision. However, it's a requirement at the high school level to have all of your courses based on competencies, and that's moving in the direction of the middle school and the elementary school as well in the state of New Hampshire. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's a trend, because there's, however, it is moving forward in the state of New Hampshire.
Bonnie, Drew.
And I just have to say that even with high school students, I find it so nerve-wracking, and I get irritated to a point my head probably spins with my boys, that they'll have a test, they won't do well on it, or maybe they won't study necessarily as hard as they could have, and not necessarily my children, but other children, but then when you hear them say, well, I can take it again next week, it's not a big deal. I'm like, listen, in life, you don't get second chances. If you want the job and there's 10 people there, you better do your homework, you better have your stuff together, and make sure your shirt's tucked in. And it's like, those are the rules that we have, and I do find that having the competencies allows kids to not try so hard the first time because they know they can make it up. And that as a board member bothers me, that as a parent bothers me, and reading that report card, because they'll be like, well, you can do this amount of stuff and you get a C. You can do this amount of stuff and you get a B, but you really gotta go overboard to get an A on the rubric. And I'm like, well, let's go for the A. And they're like, well, no, because C's okay, Mom. C's competent. My head spins. My husband, like, go outside and weed the garden, do something, get out of the house before you kill him. So I'm, even at the high school level, at the same, I find it very disappointing because it's not setting them up to be extremely successful adults. I find that it's I was brought up that you don't call in sick unless you're dying, and you don't not study if you have a test. And if you don't study and you fail, that's your punishment. Bring that home to mom and dad. It's probably not going to happen again.
What happens at work if you don't get your work done? You have to do it next week. So these kids that are waiting next week to take the test, don't they fall behind what they're supposed to take?
Absolutely, because they haven't successfully mastered the material to move into the next
And
part.
then eventually, they're so far behind, it's going to be a nightmare. I mean, that's how it would be.
And then you get an email at the end of the quarter. And it's tough because as the kids are in high school, you want them to be independent, and you want them to have the initiative to deal with the interactions of the teacher, because I don't want an email from mom going to the teacher. It's not cool. And when that happens, I'm probably not the most favorable person in the house. And then a lot of times, I want to talk to someone. I don't want to email. I feel like I'm getting the runaround. I want to sit with you and my child and figure out the problem. Because it's not that, they didn't read the book, because you've discussed it at dinner. You know that they read the book. So I think that it's tough because what we knew as education is changing. And it's not always easy to change, at least on my page. It's not easy.
Sandy?
Are the proficient, is that aligned with the Common Core thing though? The competency-based proficient, is that all like
Based on
part of that?
standards.
No.
No?
It's not part of that Common Core?
No,
That's not, okay.
the actual work was developed out of our state assessment, which is currently NECAP. So that's where proficient with distinction, substantially below proficient, all of that wording came out of it. It wasn't aligned to Common Core. It's been used in our state for years prior to Common Core.
At the high school, you said they're using the same proficient distinction. How does that carry over into college next September?
I'll tell you shortly. They didn't have it when my daughter graduated, and this year my son is going off to school, and we'll figure out how that works. I have no idea.
Yeah.
There is quite a bit of research done by folks that are competency-based in the state, and asked the colleges of higher learning, the secondary schools, to sit down with them and take a look at the transcripts that they were sending the kids from a competency-based high school. And the admissions clerk and the admissions officers are very excited because it differentiates the kids even more so, the students even more so, and the institutions of higher learning like the report cards much better because it helps really understand where the kids are on those standards and whether or not they're proficient on those competencies. So.
Who?
Mr. Gregoire,
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understood what you were saying in the very beginning.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, this report card was on hold because we don't have a curriculum. We don't have a curriculum in this school?
Sure. The comment is based on a vertically aligned curriculum, meaning it shows a progression of learning based on standards from kindergarten through 8th grade. That's what we're currently developing. There is a curriculum in the school. It's based on standards. It's currently based on New Hampshire standards. However, we need to really fine-tune our curriculum before we start developing a specific full school standards-based reporting as well as a competency-based reporting. So we have curriculum work to do. There is curriculum in the building, but it has to be fine-tuned and more detailed in order to develop a competency-based report card.
So, years ago, a teacher had to, from September until June, get her children, or attempt to teach her children A to Z.
Mhm.
Is that still the case?
Absolutely.
It is still the
Yes,
case? Okay.
absolutely.
So, so when a child goes to the next grade, this, I'm going to assume, unless there's a real issue, that the child would be promoted to the next grade, they're not holding kids back anymore, and then because it's individualized learning, the child would pick up in the next grade where they left off in the prior grade?
Yes, and that's what I'm referring to as a vertically aligned curriculum. So, say at the end of first grade, all students should have these skills as well as this content knowledge and be able to demonstrate that they've mastered the skills and are able to explain that content knowledge at a proficient level. And as they go into second grade, they pick that right back up, and the lessons are developed on the standards for second grade that are aligned with first, second, third, fourth, so there's a continuum of learning that happens, and that's what we're developing currently. So that's well laid out, and the amount of time it takes to develop a standards-based report card as well as a competency-based report card, it's time-consuming, and we're spending the time right now really aligning the curriculum to make sure that's detailed, and that we're ensuring that all students are receiving are mastering standards prior to moving to the next grade level. If they've mastered the standards at their grade level early, then we should be providing them enriched opportunities to master the standards at a higher level. So if a first grader's already mastered those standards, they should be accessing second grade standards and instruction based on their skills and knowledge base.
And this has been in progress for 2 years?
The standards-based report card?
Yes.
I believe so.
So how long will it take to get it where you want it? I mean, are you talking about something that, is it going to take another, 2 years? Is it going to take 10 years?
I think these report cards, recall seeing these report cards back in '08.
Which report cards, Mr. Brown?
The standards based, the ones that we're implementing now.
I know that when I first came in, they had spent that year prior working on developing a standards-based report card. And when I came in, we had a 12-page report card. And so it was, I think that was the kind of the first blush at it was
I remember those.
when we first came in, when I first came in. So I don't think it was back, I'm not sure what you were seeing. This is a product that you started on.
I started in Wakefield in 2011, and I was on that committee. So it was 2011 when that first document may have come to you.
I do think that through the years, report cards have been refurbished along the way, and it could have been a different report card that you saw, but I think that along the way, report cards have developed with time and with the changes in education.
Yeah, but just this one right here that I'm talking about, Steve, this version.
So,
Maybe I missed something. When did the board approve the standards-based report card? It was my understanding that it was just a pilot program and the board has never approved it.
My understanding was that this was the pilot, and this was still running with the same pilot. My understanding.
well,
I thought it was March of 2012 when you folks were talking about it. And I had stood and questioned what it was all about, knowing that my sixth grader was going to be subjected to it in seventh grade. So if my memory serves me at all, I think it's been here for 2 years, but I don't know, I don't think this board here actually adopted it.
It's been a pilot program and it's never been adopted by the board.
Can we confirm that and look into that?
We can confirm that. And that was my understanding, is that the pilot is still a pilot. There wasn't an official, it wasn't brought officially to the board for a vote for approval. So when Mr. Gregoire mentioned earlier, we put a hold on the pilot to expand in the other grades because we want to focus our time and efforts on curriculum development before we move forward into the other grades at this time. So my understanding is it is a pilot and it hasn't been brought to the board for approval to go school-wide. But there must have been a discussion at the board level in order to bring the pilot on.
Yes, May 2nd, 2012.
Okay, so it's still considered a pilot.
Yes.
It was supposed to be a quarter and they were supposed to come back to the board. They never did. The board changed hands. Still haven't done a presentation.
It was a quarter,
Yep. Exactly, Jamie.
anybody else? Go ahead.
Something that Laura asked, if kids are not held back anymore. And if they're not, and they're sent through with like somewhat proficient, or however the CPs and PBs go, doesn't that give the next grades up, like after a couple of years? Doesn't that give the teacher a really huge range? And how does one teacher meet that big range of a kid who's passed being partially proficient year after year, and the kids who have been completely proficient by like fourth or fifth grade? Isn't that a huge gap in the same grade? And how does the kid accelerated? How does she get something? And I know a lot of the kids that are partially, they get the attention they need, but there's no way to meet everybody's needs in that huge gap.
One of the deficiencies that can occur within the school system is moving students through the grades without them mastering the skills and the content knowledge from grade to grade, particularly outside of the third grade. So what we're really promoting recently and currently is that students are proficient in their literacy and numeracy skills prior to leaving third grade. So that's our focus, and our focus has been now since I've been here, and I know prior those conversations have been happening. However, now we're really emphasizing the fact that students need to come out of third grade proficient in literacy and numeracy, because after third grade it becomes extremely difficult to progress at that proficient level without those skills.
So you come back in third grade if they need it.
Well, the goal is to make sure that you're providing the supports necessary for those students that aren't necessarily demonstrating proficiency in the earlier grades, so that they do come out of third grade proficient. And what we need to do is really look at our resources, both fiscally as well as human resources, to make sure all students in pre-K through third grade are getting the supports they need if they are lacking some of those skills, so that they are successful. And that is difficult in the sense that you do have a wide range of abilities in a classroom. However, we have very skilled staff members that can work within those varying ability levels, and we also have support staff that can assist with moving students forward if they're deficient in some of those skills. So we're really focusing our efforts on that pre-K to 3 concept so that students are coming out able to read as well as able to succeed in their mathematics skills. It's a focus of ours, and keep driving that focus.
Anybody else? All right. Why don't we move on to the high school piece, because I think that's probably, as far as the high school piece goes, where in our area agreement with Rochester, 10% the 4 grades can attend another high school outside of Spalding. We have met with Rochester recently a number of occasions. We did ask for 30%. They kicked it back to 20%, and the full board voted to keep it at 10%, but allow that 10% could be a combination of the 4 grades combined. So it's not just 10% of 9th grade, 10% of 10th grade, 11th and 12th. We can now use the 4 grades together for a total of 20%. It will increase it by a few, but not as many as we would like.
It's at 10%.
10%.
But combined together is still 10%,
Yes.
20%.
Yes. No. Combined, the way it was now was the 4 grade, 10% of each grade of the 4 grades. But they've agreed to allow that you can combine the total of the 4 grades for 10%. And then we discussed with Governor Wentworth about the possibility of going to Kingswood, and the word that we got back was that they were not interested in changing the number that can attend Kingswood beyond our area agreement with Rochester, because if we were to send all the Wakefield students to Kingswood, that would represent an increase of 40% in their population, and they did not want to do that. Although we have requested as a board to actually meet with the Governor Wentworth board to maybe discuss that with them, but that, as of right now, is where the high school piece is. Anybody have any questions? Or
As far as the board goes, what's like the driving force behind looking into the entire district going to Kingswood?
Well,
as far as the board goes, what do you
well, if you base the entire population based upon what Middleton, the numbers that Middleton just received from Governor Wentworth, we would be looking at a savings of $400,000 a year.
So it's more of a financial instead of an academic?
Well, it's both. I mean, I don't know if anybody's have you been over there? I mean, they have a brand new building, they have excellent courses over there. It's the whole picture.
Do they have the vocational
Yes, go
school?
ahead. Fine.
I guess he might look at it as a fiscal. I look at it as, I want the parents in our town to have a choice.
Right.
Because some parents work in Wolfboro, some parents work in Alton, some parents work on that side of the state, and it's hard to, after school buses, transportation, it's hard to even get to events if you're Laconia and you're coming this way, and it's just, geographically better for some parents and for some families. And there are some kids that just want a choice to be able to go there. And I think we had such a huge influx that we had to look at something, because we have like 7 kids on a waiting list. 6 or 7 kids from this year's graduating 8th grade class that wanted to go.
Right.
And to say no to those families means that we might be jeopardizing the success of their high school career, and that weighs heavy on my heart. So I need to know that I'm doing the best that I can for the families that need to make that different choice.
Well, I think the board did make, you tried to increase the number from Rochester. So, I mean, parents can't, you're doing what you can within your
We're doing everything we
means. So nobody should be able to be the board, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're trying. I just was wondering if there was a driving force to have us go to Kingswood versus going to Spalding.
Personally, mine was all the applications that we got. And we put out a survey, and the families that are at Spalding are primarily happy, but the children coming up through the ranks, the parents are looking at an alternative of Kingswood rather than Spalding.
Because you also have the difference between, you have, the town of Wakefield, and then the kids are going to the city of Rochester. Kingswood is more aligned as a small town, Wolfboro, as a small town like Wakefield. Wakefield and Wolfboro, I would say, are more closely resemble each other than Wakefield and Rochester do. So, it wasn't just one piece of it. We looked at everything as far, from financially, academic, the programs that Governor Wentworth or Kingswood offered. It wasn't just one driving force. What I've heard is, like Bonnie's already, parents want to be able to have a choice. And that's what we've looked into to try to give parents a choice.
Okay.
Did you have something, or you want to? Go ahead, ma'am.
I just need a little clarification. You said you asked Spalding to change the agreement to 30%, and then they kicked back with 20%? So during the committee, they said no to 30. They said, I believe, if I recall, they were suggesting maybe 20, but this is just during a committee. So the committee doesn't have, it has to go back to the full board, and the full Rochester board voted not to change the 10%, other than the piece of being able to use all 4 grades towards that total of 10%. And that would take effect starting with
Next
year.
graduating next year.
Next year, correct. Mary,
When is the area agreement with Rochester up for renewal?
it's not.
It's not?
It's open-ended.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh.
We can bring it back for negotiations at any time, and that's what we did. But you have to understand that, I guess it's been since like 1970. It was about 1970 that the agreement was put in, but it's budgetary for them. If we polled our children, they already have a reduction in force going on this year from situations and tax caps and all of that. But if we polled 20% of our kids, or 30% of our kids from them, that would be a huge budget issue for them as well. So I understand where they're coming from. They're trying to protect their budget. But that just means that we, as a board, have to really be willing to push the issue to say, but we need to make sure our kids have a place to go before they say, we're nixing the area agreement, and then we're left without a high school.
It gives us a lot more power, I think, than we're using. If they need our kids so badly, we should have more power to say, no, we're not going to send 30, but 20 is reasonable. I don't think more than 20% want to go. I think a lot of people are happy with this Spalding.
Need a mom in the back again.
Go ahead.
No,
What puts 6 or 7 of them on a waiting list opposed to ones who got in? What's the criteria that
We did it by which ones were received first this year, and we're doing our best to establish a policy for a pool that they'll all have to go into. But we had never, in the history that I can remember of the board, we'd never reached the max 10%.
But now we are.
But now we are, and once again, the education in Wakefield is evolving into something different, and we're doing the best we can to accommodate the kids. The woman in the back in the black shirt.
I was gonna say I'd rather send my kids to GovernmentOversite too. I think they're more aligned with our town. And I think my understanding that they teach in, they grade in letter grades too.
They do.
Well,
To create more momentum, we do need the community involved. So if you have your shared concerns with other people in town, they need to let us know. It's not something that we can do without the town of Wakefield. So it's important to get involved, and if it's important to you, I'm sure you can talk like-minded folks in town to at least attend and voice their opinions and their concerns.
good, I'm sorry, Mr. Terzi had it.
Just so that all of you know as well, any amendment to the area agreement goes on the ballot for a vote. So you'll have an opportunity to vote to any amendment to an agreement with Rochester. I just wanted to point that out. As well as the board did revise their policy that states for the 14-15 school year, it's first come, first serve on the request to go to Kingswood. However, the 15-16 school year is a lottery process. So I just wanted you folks to know that as well, that the policy was revised based on the number of requests that we've received recently.
And just, excuse me, and just to throw it, I believe the last time that the area agreement was amended was approximately 15 years ago? Is that 12, 15 years ago?
When it got actually approved by the Department of Education. Yes.
So, go ahead,
I
ma'am.
have a question about the amendment. I have a son, my son was one of the lucky first come, first served, who will be going to Kingswood next year. I have a daughter coming up in the ranks. If it goes to a lottery situation, am I going to be in the situation where I have one kid at one school and then one kid forced to go to another school, or is there some sort of?
We have to devise that policy and figure out what our lottery is gonna be, and we have to figure out if families that already attend take preference, or if we have to be fair to everybody and put everybody in a lottery. Those are all things that we're gonna have to figure out, and
So it's not fully fleshed out?
it's not fully fleshed out, and we know we have a year to do it, and we're gonna do the best that we can.
The problem with the lottery is there is a chance that a student that's freshman or sophomore in another school may not be picked to be a junior or senior in that same school. So that lottery idea is problematic.
So they could start?
No. If,
No,
once they're in, they're in. Once they're in, they're in.
So it's just the.
No. Once they're in, they're in.
It's only for any.
Yeah.
Unless they opt out.
Right.
Okay.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Sorry, Steve.
You said that them allowing us to use the 10% throughout the 4 grades is beneficial because it gives us more students that can go there, correct?
Correct.
What happens, and it doesn't sound like we'll be in this situation because there's a lot of people who want to do this, but what happens if one year there's no 8th graders going into 9th grade that want to do it, but it's, say it's 10 kids that can get in. It's all 10 of them are sophomores. Does that mean for the next 3 years, nobody from Wakefield can go because that 10%?
No, that actually would mean that if we had juniors that wanted, say we had juniors from Spalding that wanted a spot, they would be able to finish their year at Kingswood. Because when you take it as a whole, and say there's some years, like this year, I think we have 3 seniors, 2 or 3 seniors. No, more than that, graduating this year. I think we have 2 or 3 seniors graduating this year, but next year we've got 6. So it's all gonna be based.
So, but as a whole, if we only have 2 or 3 seniors graduating, there would only be 2 or 3 spots for those incoming freshmen because the other spots that of the 10% are taken up by a higher number in each grade level, opposed to being divided evenly. Am I explaining that right?
All things that we have to figure out.
Go ahead.
We provide transportation for the kids that go to Kingswood?
No.
No, we do not. There are area pickups, like, there's one over in Effingham, there's one right across the border in Wolfboro, there's another one.
Cedar Park.
Cedar Park, and then there's another one down, and parents would have to, well, it's a lot like the high school parents now, like, you have to either take them to the pub or the rec, I mean, unless you're lucky enough to have the bus stop in front of your house, which doesn't happen for a lot of us. So you have to get up and actually take them to a bus stop.
Anybody else?
This can be changed every year, right? You said it's open every year?
The area, we're still looking at it, we're still discussing it, we've asked to be put on their board and on their agenda. We've asked to be put to go on their agenda in front of their full board.
We talked about Kingswood.
Yes.
Many years ago, parents could pay for their children to go to Kingswood.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the 10% / 20% that Rochester says can go over there, does Wolfboro say that they would take extra kids if the parents wanted to pay the tuition themselves?
Absolutely. You can apply
They
to go
will.
to any, you can apply to go to any high school in New Hampshire if you're willing to pay the tuition
If you're willing to
yourself.
pay it,
Mhm.
okay.
It would be like going to,
I didn't know if that would, if Rochester has enough,
like, you could go to Phillips, Exeter, or you could go to Brewster. If you're willing to pay the bill, your kids can, and if they get accepted, it's an application process to go to Kingswood. If you get accepted, you can pay the tuition and send your child.
Does the lottery take that into consideration, the application process, instead of it being a pool?
I don't know if that would
Based on that?
necessarily be, how do you say, well, you can afford it so you can pay, you
No,
know, and.
Just the kids who get in, you know, there's a waiting list, it wasn't who applied and had better grades or whatever.
For us, no. And what we ask is tell me if I'm wrong, but what we ask is, once you get approved and you're accepted, please write us a letter and tell us, you know, that you got accepted, or contact the SAU or one of us to say, hey, I got in, or hey, I decided not to go, let another kid go. We've asked for that because we don't want a child to miss out on an opportunity. But I think that they look at academics, they look at
So they have to accept
behavior.
the kids in the pool, they still have to.
They
accept
have to
them.
accept the children that we approve.
No, they don't.
They don't?
No,
Don't our kids have to be accepted?
they have to be accepted, but they're not automatically accepted. So they still have to be reviewed by Governor Wentworth to accept that student, because it's not a resident of Governor
Isn't that
Wentworth.
what I just
I haven't
said?
Yeah, it is.
It's just what I
You-
said.
No, what you said is they have to be approved
No.
to be, if they're approved, they're accepted, I think is how you put it.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. Our school board could approve sending a child there. Kingswood has the opportunity to review the child applicant and then say whether or not they will accept the appointment.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, let's move on to cafe services. Does anybody have any questions? Laura?
where do we stand with cafe services?
You wanna take that one, Chris?
Well, yeah, I guess. We've had a meeting about a month or so ago with Cafe Services, and we discussed some issues that has been going on, I guess, for a while. I mean, we're kind of trying to get a handle of how long it's been going on things that have been going on as far as the food and, you know, the comments that we are getting and stuff like that. But we have another meeting coming up May of June 2nd, something like that.
And we're supposed to have a report of the meeting that we had and the outcome of the issues that we brought forward. I just haven't gotten that back from our representative yet.
That should be to us hopefully soon, so really haven't made any decisions on that. we just wanted your comments on some of this stuff too.
I came to the parent lunch, and I have to be very honest, I was appalled. I would not eat. My son-in-law wouldn't eat, my daughter wouldn't eat, and my granddaughter never gets hot lunch because she looked at me while I was sitting there and said, "You see now why I don't get the hot lunch?" It was no child found that dinner appealing. And I watched it just keep going in the trash, going in the trash, going in the trash. And, you know, you can't make children eat food that is going to make them be sick. It doesn't, not that the food was bad, don't misunderstand, but just didn't appeal to them. But parents are assuming that their children are eating that hot lunch every day, and they're not. It's going in the trash. So I just think that years ago, I mean, you're never gonna please all of the kids, but years ago, there was always the choices of having a sandwich, and there was a choice of a salad bar, and there were a lot more choices, and the food just was more appealing. I know unfortunately that the laws have changed, and you have to follow the nutritional guidelines, et cetera, but I wasn't impressed, and I wasn't impressed last year either with the dinner. When you're having the parents come, it's not the people that are cooking the food, it's the food.
Is it the presentation and the taste?
Yeah, last year it was hamburgers, and this year it was like a chicken pot pie with no crust or biscuit, or it was just...
Now, we addressed that actually with them, and they told us that there was two recipes for the crust, and for whatever reason that wasn't made and put on. What I was told that the reason what I heard that wasn't put on was they used the leftovers for soup the next day.
So we voiced a lot of concerns. We listened to the children, we listened to the staff. I asked the question, why, aren't they getting this, and this, and why doesn't it look super good? And I also asked, because they said their meals are consistent, but I said, who's weighed the trash? I said, how much is being thrown away? And I said, a great way to let the kids understand about waste is to recycle with clear trash barrels. It's a great science thing. I wish the science teachers were here, because it's a great science experiment to have an annual waste, like a consumption of all the waste, and your goal is to get to a zero number of waste by the end of the year, and that's food waste. And because I saw some of the meals.
But I don't blame the children for not eating it. I wouldn't eat it.
Anybody else have any comments about that?
Yeah.
I make my daughter's lunch every day, and it would be so much easier if I could send her to school to get a nutritious meal that looks good. I was here for pizza one day, it was horrendous. It was a wet dough with a little bit of sauce, a little bit of cheese. She begged me to have the sloppy joe that they had one day, and she threw it away. She cried because it was so awful. She couldn't eat it. So I can't send her to school to get lunch. So I get up, an extra 45 minutes early to make her a proper lunch so she can bring it to school every day. And that's a bummer.
Well, now I feel guilty as a mom for having my daughter have at lunch. So this is kind of horrifying.
Just go and eat, go and look at it, or go and eat it, and you won't want to.
Yeah.
I can't make her eat that.
Go ahead, Colleen.
I was here for that school board meeting when they presented the actual food that they were going to bring.
Yeah.
We all were.
It was night and day. There was actually chicken in the salad. And right now, you need a microscope to see the chicken in the salad. I mean, it's horrible.
I saw strawberries, grapes, and pineapple is what I saw, and it looked delicious,
all
and
of
the
it looked
salad
great.
looked great, and they said that new laws got put into place, and they pretty much told Bob and I that it came down to money. And if we were willing to pay for more labor, it would look better. And it would be more presentable. They said it was labor. You know?
Well, you know,
How many meals do they serve a day, roughly?
Breakfast and lunch?
Sure.
300?
400.
400?
That's a big guess, but.
400?
Is that split evenly, breakfast, lunch, or is that
No.
higher at lunch than
Definitely
breakfast?
higher lunch.
What is the usual average cost per plate that we?
$2.90.
You,
$2.25.
the school charges for?
Well,
$2.25.
I thought the cafe services appropriated about $2.90 per meal, but cost about. I thought the
They
breakdown
pay
was-
$2.25.
The students pay $325.
So is it subsidized for the school, for your budget? I'm just trying to get a handle on how it works with that.
And there was when they first approached the school, there was a presentation that at the end of the year, we'd be receiving a check. They'd be cutting a check and paying back to the school district. $4,000 or $5,000, I think was the number. That hasn't happened.
Have they been running a deficit year to year?
You want to jump in on this?
No, actually, that we did get a check back last year.
Right, if they spent less money than they budgeted, we got refunded. If they spent more money than they budgeted, they absorbed the
Eat it.
cost.
Last year.
What Cafe Services in that contract offered the school district is $5,000 to buy equipment, and they would prorate it over a 5-year period to pay back. So it'd be like an interest-free loan, but they didn't offer to give a $4,000 or $5,000 check at the end of the year.
But that's never happened, all right?
But they
The
haven't fixed
equipment's not been bought.
Well, no, it's the
Equipment's
school's,
still broken.
but that's the school's decision to buy the equipment, not Cafe Services. They can only recommend it.
Well, I would think that they'd come to the cafe service committee and ask if if cafe service is in there, and their people are saying they need another refrigerator, and the refrigerator in there isn't working, and the ice maker isn't working, whose job is it to come to Bob and I and say, hey, go to the board and tell them we need the ice maker
And that's
fixed?
been at least for 2 years.
And that's been 2 years. So if they're not coming to us, then we think they're not utilizing it.
I'll check with Cafe Services, see what's going on with that.
You said the refrigerator?
Yeah.
go ahead, Leo.
So they're budgeting $290 and you're charging $225? I'm just trying to.
No.
No.
What it is they budget like $150.
If that.
Okay.
$150, but we charge $225. So they want one meal to cost about $1.50 to make. And then the rest is insurance, salaries, paper goods.
Is the rest of the money.
Sandy.
But how many people like pay for lunch and how many do we get reimbursed for? Like, is there an even amount? Do we have more free and reduced lunches than paid lunches?
There's
Or
double the amount of free and reduced.
double? Well,
I get moved to.
okay.
You said it was tiered per grade?
Yes, it's like, I think the little grades are $2, and then what grade is that, $2.25? 50.
For the same meal?
Yes.
Different portions for different ages.
So,
Yeah.
So they get a
That's
4-ounce
how-
hamburger, little ones, and then the 6-ounce hamburger for the.
And we understand that the kids are not, at this point in time, able to buy a second lunch or extra milk or make choices to switch.
we were told they could.
We were told that they could, but we understand that they're not, and that was one of the issues that we did bring
One
up.
choice per day?
Choice per day, but they're running out of food. And then the kids that have the last meal are
Getting whatever they have.
getting whatever's left,
Yeah, that's.
and that's not right.
Especially if we're paying the bill.
Laura.
Has the board, or are you considering going back to having our own cafeteria?
That's always an option.
We asked for information from Andrew, our last board meeting, to get that information to us, to see where we can go prior to these past 2 years. And we haven't got that yet, so we're working on that.
Is there any other option?
There's always options, and I remember Mrs. Nason sitting up here saying, whatever happened to one traditional homemade meal and you just suck it up and pay for everybody and get rid of everything else. And I remember so clearly sitting there and I'm thinking, I could be a lunch lady. I would love that. Cooking for the kids all day, that would make me happy. And you really start to sit and wonder, because, you know, they weren't happy when we were doing it before. The kids didn't seem to be pleased with the food. And now we've tried the outside entity, and that's not working either. So, you know, maybe we go back to one traditional meal every day. And if you don't like it, we can, you know, we have the choice of 2 or 3 different sandwiches and an apple and, you know, if you don't like it, well, I don't know if you can, are we a peanut-free school yet? No, so you can have peanut butter and jelly, turkey and cheese, or ham and cheese. You know,
What's wrong with an a la carte menu?
We have that too.
Or a soup.
It's all choices, and we need to know what the people want to hear. We get the surveys back, but the surveys are primarily filled out by the students. They want Oreos, brownies, lobster, pizza, the good steak, you know, so we really need a parent's input, and I know sadly parents work and they can't necessarily always see what's going on. So we need input.
There's a thing on Facebook, it's like School Lunch Rocks, and they actually have a school in Provo, well, a bunch of schools in Provo, Utah, and their lunch program, go on Facebook and just Google Utah lunch program. It looks like a cruise ship line. I'm not kidding. This stuff is carved out. There's so much food. There's so much color. I'm like very creative as far as like color goes. So my thing is that fill that plate, make it as colorful as possible. Like with their fruit, they have little cups. They cut up bananas and strawberries. And I had said to my husband, like, why can't they cut up the stuff and put a little plop of, you know, whipped cream on or something so the kids eat it? And his answer to me was they didn't have, be quiet. They didn't have time for the labor. And I'm like, that's prep work. You gotta make it look good. Don't throw a banana. Make a dessert, you know, and give them a bunch of stuff, like the cute little bananas that look like dolphins. You put grapes in them. They'll eat that stuff.
Does that website give any information?
It gives you everything. They'll give you
The
recipes,
cost
the cost. What it is they do, they're a co-op, and because they have so many districts or whatever, 14 districts get together so they can buy cheaper, but it still can be done. There are a lot of other schools that do it, but they're like a really good model for us to all look at and see how great their food is. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And the people are so nice, and they'll answer any question that you want to, you know, ask them. They'll tell you all recipes. I mean, they give you all their information that they're doing, and it's pretty neat.
The cost has to be
Check it
higher,
out.
and a lot of people in Wakefield really can't afford to pay more than they're paying now.
Well, they still get the programs that we get. They still get the food programs, and a lot of the stuff we already get. So.
Well, one of the things we did ask Cafe Services was about cutting up the fruit, and they said they couldn't do that because of labor costs.
Because I was like, they serve kiwi cut in half with a spoon. And I was like, and I said, whatever happened to like apple slices with like
Peanut butter.
peanut butter, or I was thinking like cream cheese with a little bit of sweetener in it, you know, just dip. Kids love dip. Ants on a log, they love dip. And they said that the kids eat it this way. And I was like, my kids have never carved a kiwi. If it doesn't look like a star and it's not cut up on the side of the plate, they're not gonna do it themselves. If there's oranges and apples and kiwis out, it'll be gone in 15 minutes. But if they have to do the work, it's gonna rot in the fridge.
It should be a little restaurant, I'm sorry.
Do they use government commodities? Which programs do you guys have?
Which government commodities programs do we have?
We have the federal commodities program.
Federal commodities program?
The whole program, or just a certain segment, or?
I can't hear.
Do we have the whole program or just certain parts of it?
No, we have the whole program as far as I know. We have all commodities from the federal government.
All of them, he believes.
You got a problem with that?
No, not
Just
at all.
kidding.
Your tax dollars at work.
All right, well, that's the other piece of it too, when they were brought, the lunch program was running deficits each year of somewhere between
60 and 75,000 in 5 years prior to cafe services coming in. It was either 324 or $342,000 that the district was short, which means that the taxpayers have to make up that difference at the end of every year. So that was a piece of, I think, why the cafe services was, that we went to cafe services, because of those deficits. I've seen pictures of the food from from what I've seen from the pictures, I'm not that impressed with the presentation of the food. I mean, there's gotta be a way that you can build or make a nutritious meal and not be running $60,000 to $75,000 deficits a year.
There are.
So, I mean, there has to be another way. There is another piece to that, though, and that's trying to get people to pay. We have a high number of non-payment.
Do you guys offer free reduced lunch tickets and stuff like that, or is it just a straight price or you don't pay?
We do it, they don't fill it out and return it. And it seems to be that they understand that they know that we won't refuse a child food because we're not gonna let a child go hungry. So even if they don't pay, we still supply food. And last year, we decided not to make it a separate meal because the child doesn't deserve to be segregated. Like, you can have a sun butter and apple sandwich and everyone else is eating hot lunch, because that puts an added weight on that child's shoulders, and they shouldn't know that their folks aren't taking care of the bill. So we always get to the point that we send the applications, but it's the same repeat offenders the majority of the time, and it's not just one or two children. And it adds up after a while. And you can send the application, and they know that even if they don't pay, their child's still gonna get food. And at the end of the year, we're like, okay, do you go to small claims court? Do you go back for 4 or 5 years and say, well, for 4 or 5 years, you haven't paid your bill? And how do you make that work? Well, I mean, really, if you have suggestions, let us know.
There has to be a way. I mean, I work hard for my money and I pay for my child's lunch. And then how can someone else just decide not to pay for the lunch? That's unfair.
Because we think alike, and other people don't always think alike.
And I agree that the child should not know that this is happening and they shouldn't be penalized for it, but there has to be a way to get to that parent and get them to pay, because that's just, it's ridiculous.
It's not fair to the other taxpayers.
It's not. I mean, I pay for my child's lunch.
That's right. And then you're paying for someone else's when these deficits come in.
Right. We have to look into that.
Or,
The same way you go about the residency forms.
Thinking the same thing.
It's all done. We do the same exact thing, but you can't get blood from a stone.
Unless you hit your fingers with a stone, blood everywhere.
Sandy?
Well, like the high school does that, the little card things, right? And you can
My
pay-
school box is
Yes,
great.
My School Box. And we are set up for that, I think. Because when we first did the whole system years back, it was supposed to be a thing where, oh, you'll get a text or an email saying that you owe $10. It was supposed to be no more than $10, but I don't get a bill. And I do go in and ask so I can pay my bill, but I don't get the bill, so I don't know, how do they get sent out? And this was way before you were there, and it was a $10, the second it was over $10, the bill went out, and people, because when you get a $40 bill, you go, holy crap, I owe that much? So it's kind of hard. So when it's 10, that's great, but if you do that school bucks thing, they swipe the card or whatever, you can pay online, you can pay, you take it right out of your checkbook, you can, charge it, whatever.
Easy pass,
Yeah, kind of like an easy pass.
We understand that that's a concern, and, Andrew is diligent in working with the cafe services staff to get those collected. But it's hard.
But I thought we were set up for that. I think it's like a NutriKids or something that, I thought it was kind of set up for that, so we can do it. I don't know if it's an added cost or.
I think it's $1.99 for me to throw $50 on my kid's account.
And NutriKids does send out a letter after a certain amount of money. The cafe services staff calls parents first, and after it reaches a certain amount, they send out a letter.
I've owed $40 and no one's called me.
We
And I
underst-
owed $70 one time in the summertime when it was the other cafeteria, when it was the other group that did it. And I had a heart attack. I'm like, whoa, you guys were supposed to let me know.
Well, you know, I'm being told by the cafe services staff that they're sending out the letters and calling people.
I've never got a letter from Cafe Service, ever.
Well, if you paid your bill, you wouldn't
I
have
have,
a bill.
listen, I don't know what I owe. I pay and then I go, oh, you know.
Did any of you ever, this is me and I'm old school, the envelopes? They went home on Friday, you put your money in, you circled what your kids wanted, and you sent it back in.
The same people aren't paying aren't gonna do that either.
No, they're not gonna do that either, but it does make it convenient for the other parents
Yeah,
that
it's
do it.
Much easier. I just randomly like write out a $50 check and send it in. If who knows, I could have a surplus, I'm not really sure.
If you have a surplus, you don't get a credit for it at the end of the
No,
year
you
though.
don't, because
It like just
had
get
that.
absorbed, you don't get your money back.
Yeah, I've had that too. And I said, well, can it just go to another kid, like another kid at the school, sibling?
It should. I mean, if you're willing to pay extra money for some other child,
Yeah,
for another family's child.
Oh, no, just to go to a different sibling, like can you transfer Jimmy's account to Sheila and they'll be like,
They couldn't.
yeah, no. All things that we hear and we're working on.
Because we have so many that are free and reduced, that it's way out balanced. Can everybody
Everybody have what?
can everybody get free lunch?
A statewide school, I don't think so, I don't think we qualify. Mm.
Yeah, but I'll check on the income. That's the point.
So,
Would the board consider setting up a parent committee, giving them space here to meet, and maybe have Lino with his expertise in this area on that committee, and maybe a board member sit on it and see if they can come up with some good ideas?
I think that would be good, but boy, wouldn't it be nice if Lino just stepped forward with a whole plan?
Well, yeah.
We'd all be eating Italian all the time.
But I think maybe to pick his brain, and some of the parents have some good ideas here. Sandy's worked in the kitchen, she probably has some good ideas.
I would do it in a second.
Invite you first time.
No, you
Just
won't.
provide the space.
So nice, you couldn't find me.
Yeah, we get one plate done an hour.
Oh, I don't think so. You don't know how I work.
Maybe you have to separate these two.
They can't work in the same kitchen, they have to be on opposite ends.
Do the dishes.
Okay.
well, I would think that'd be a great idea. Set up a committee with parents and members of the community and
You have to do that sooner than later.
If the parents are telling us that they do not want cafe services in the building next year, things need to be done clickety-clack, without hesitation. And we need to speak with Andrew and find out the repercussions on the district, and if it's in the budget, we did not budget for it, so it's not in the budget. So that would be us trying to maneuver funds. It would be something that we are not fiscally prepared for. So we would need to have a presentation yesterday.
But it may not be a bad idea, to start it, do it now, have the information readily available for the following year.
That regretfully gives our kids one more year of,
Are they a fee-based management service or profit-based?
Profit.
So they're self-sufficient?
yes.
He's got some ideas.
Anybody else? All right, smarter balance. Just for, I'm sure there's a number of people in the room that have not only heard of Smarter Balanced and Common Core, but are there any folks in the room that haven't heard about Smarter Balanced or Common Core? Everyone's heard of those?
I've heard
Good.
of Common Core, but not Smarter Balance.
Smarter Balanced Assessments. Well, we asked Representative Cordelli to come to answer any questions. Representative Cordelli is on the House Education Committee. So he's up on, why don't you grab a chair, Glenn?
Give me that chair.
He's up on not only the Smarter Balanced Assessments, but also Common Core, if anybody has any questions.
Glenn, if you want to sit here for the camera, that'd be great.
That's
right, it is an election year.
You can sit here. No.
You can sit here, you're a board member. You sit there, please.
Thank you for coming, Glenn.
Sure, my pleasure. Maybe I can just give you some background information. As Mr. Brown said, I'm a member of the House Education Committee, just finishing my freshman year. We've been very involved this year, both with Common Core and the assessments. And as most of you might evidently know, the federal government funded two consortiums to develop assessments. One is known as PARC, and the other is Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, SBAC. New Hampshire signed on with SBAC, along with another 20 some odd states. New Hampshire just is in the process of finishing up the field test, the first field tests for the Smarter Balanced assessment. The actual assessments are to begin next spring and will replace the current kneecap assessments. There has been loud voices across the country about these assessments and other individual state assessments that are taking place. Massachusetts, who was probably the highest performing state in the country, signed on with the PARC assessments and just recently announced a 2-year delay as an option for school districts. They could go ahead with PARC or go ahead with the old MCAS assessment systems that they had been using in Massachusetts. Peabody School District just recently, within the past week, said we're sticking with the MCAS system. We're not moving ahead with PARC system. In New Hampshire, the Nashua School District has been very involved with the Smarter Balanced assessments. They had a professional development day where they had the teachers go in and take Smarter Balanced assessment pilot questions. And there was a lot of concern raised by the parents, by the teachers union, by the principal of the middle school. I have copies of their letters. The middle school principal, quoting staff, said, staff opinions he quoted were, "I feel sad for the students who have to take this test. Not many will be successful. I tried the 6th grade math. It was humbling. It was scary." So House Education Committee has been very concerned about these assessments. But assessments, a statewide assessment, is required by state law. And I will quote that to you. Each year, a statewide assessment shall be administered in all school districts in the state in grades 3 through 8 and 1 grade in high school. All public school students in the designated grades shall participate in the assessment. Nashua went to the next level and got a legal opinion. What if we say no, and we say we, Nashua, are going to delay for 2 years in taking the Smarter Balanced assessment? The legal opinion, which I can supply you a copy of also, said it's a gray area. It doesn't seem like any court would allow you to do this given the state statutes. And if you do go ahead and do this, the natural result will be that the state will go to court and file an injunction against your school district. So it's my understanding that they are going to go ahead with the Smarter Balanced Assessments in Nashua. There has been various legislation this year. There was one bill, HB 1432, that initially would require the state to have a 2-year delay in the assessment. That was killed in the House Education Committee. When it went to the full House, it was amended so that it would no longer be a delay. We would go forward next year with the Smarter Balanced Assessment, but that there would be a study commission set up to study the assessment, the kinds of questions that were being asked, the method in which it was given, pretty much all areas would be studied. That was defeated by the House. They said no, not even a study. There was another bill introduced in the Senate, SB 343, which was basically amended in the House to limit the types of questions that could be asked. A major source of concern in House education this year has been the possibility of questions related to skills, knowledge, and dispositions. Dispositions is a very scary word. If you look it up in all the U.S. Department of Education literature, it's behaviors, habits of the mind. It really gets into social issues, not knowledge and skills. So this SB 343 bill was amended to limit to skills and knowledge questions on the Smarter Balanced or any statewide assessment. It did not go as far as I would have liked. I had other language that would have specifically said no dispositions, behaviors, things like that. That was not passed. But it was passed with this watered down language, and because there are differences in the Senate bill and what the House passed, it'll go to what they call a committee of conference to work out the differences and send that on. So hopefully that will have some impact as to what can be asked of your students on these assessments. I introduced a bill, the one bill I had that did get passed, related to the questions that are asked on the assessments. Right now, with your kneecap exams, if you go onto the Department of Education website afterwards, you can see the released questions that are asked on the kneecap exam. And so my bill basically said that that has to continue. After we go to Smarter Balanced, we want the same ability to see at least the released questions that are made available. So that did pass, and hopefully that will help to some degree as well. In terms of other things that are going on in the state, Londonderry School District presented the New Hampshire Department of Education with a waiver request. And their request was basically, in high school, don't use Smarter Balanced. Use the PSAT or SAT. There's been a lot of comment that generally these assessments, when you get to high school, the kids really don't care. They're interested in the PSATs or the SATs, definitely, because that has meaning to them. But who cares about the kneecap or now the Smarter Balanced? So there is some validity to that, I think, and this Department of Education is looking seriously at that. Manchester is talking about doing some kind of waiver request as well. We had a presentation at House Education 3 or 4 weeks ago from the Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Education. And this summer, they will be submitting a new waiver request to the U.S. Department of Education. This would be a renewal of waiver from No Child Left Behind. And in that waiver request, they're considering several options related to what assessments are given and when. And there were 4 options that they laid out. One was to stay with Smarter Balance grades 3 through 8 and 11. The second was, in high school, use the PSAT or SAT. Third, move to performance-based or competency assessments at all these levels on a statewide basis. And fourth was district-designed assessment package with possibly a commissioner waiver to innovative school districts to develop their own package of how they want to assess students in that district. They have talked to the U.S. Department of Education about that fourth option, and they were told Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan will never approve that. So that's where they are. They're working on this waiver request to be submitted this summer, I believe. And my understanding is they are in contact with all the superintendents about this and just going over these options with them. What I've told everybody that I talk to is the school boards also need to be involved and be going over this with their superintendents. School boards have to be involved with all of what's going on in education. I heard one board member said that change is difficult sometimes. I'd say sometimes change is not good. So we have to make sure that we're doing the best. And so I would urge the Wakefield School Board to have an ongoing dialogue with the superintendent and for him to take back to the Department of Education and Commissioner Berry, this is what options Wakefield would like to see in that waiver request to the Department of Education in Washington. And I just wanted to touch, Mr. Brown had mentioned to me also data mining was a concern. There is concern about the availability of the information that will be entered into the Smarter Balanced assessments. It's an online test now. It will be an online test. And what happens with that data? Who can that data be shared with? Our agreement with Smarter Balanced Consortium says that they have to respect all federal and state laws. And this year a law was passed, HB 1586, which was modeled on legislation that I developed, but unfortunately cut out some important sections of my legislation. But it does restrict, I believe, the ability for Smarter Balanced to share student identifiable information with anyone. So I think that there are some protections in that, but I believe more are needed. I understand that your district and maybe Spalding and Wentworth, perhaps you use Google Docs and Google Apps. That's a concern. There was a suit brought against Google in California, and they admitted that they scan individual data in those files because they're in the advertising business. It goes to Google is very concerned about this. My legislation, a separate bill, all-encompassing bill, they even had a Google representative at the public hearing on my bill in Concord. They contacted the House Education Chairman saying they did not like the provision in my bill that said even with parental consent, student data could not be shared with a private for-profit corporation. And they have contacted me, but I haven't returned their calls. So that's a concern. And if you do use Google Docs, Google Apps, I have policy recommendations from the National Privacy Center, National Institute of Technology, with recommendation on what you should have in agreements with Google if you're going to make that information available to them. Use those applications. So I'd be glad to pass that on to you as well. And just mention with Smarter Balanced, just within the past week, their IT contractor had a security breach. Lots of information, personal information was made available. In this case, it was business-related, employees and things like that. It wasn't student-level data that was breached. But this has got to be an ongoing concern in this age we live in, with the state databases and with outside internet-based databases. So this is something that is going to take an ongoing, really, effort to monitor that. And one of the things that was in my bill that did not get passed was confirmation of the ability for parents to look at the data that's being kept in the statewide databases related to your student. I think that's very important. It should be there under federal law, and is to an extent. But I just saw, I forget where the state was, a parent wanted to do that, wanted to see what information was in the statewide database about their child. The school district told her, well, we're not set up for that capability. It'll cost you $10,000 for us to develop that capability for you to see your child's data. So, this change to Common Core Smarter Balanced, it's just, it's not finished, it's ongoing, and it'll be ongoing for years, I suspect. And, anytime, you hear of something going on, I'm happy to answer your questions, and perhaps you have some questions tonight.
Go ahead, Laura.
So that means that we will be taking Smarter Balance testing here at the Paul School. Yeah. I do recall the board at a meeting, I can't tell you, maybe 3 or 4 meetings ago, that the board was very, very specific that the testing be reviewed by the administration to make sure that personal questions other than name, grade level, that was all the information that should be, personal information that should be allowed for the students. Is that going to be the case?
As I stated earlier in our board meeting, bottom line, there's a RSA as to what you can provide for student information when it comes to identifying a student, and the state provides that law so that, this is my thoughts, provides the law so that we are guaranteed that that information, any other identifiable information, isn't given or isn't provided. So in order to adopt Smarter Balanced, and I believe it was already stated that they have to follow all state and federal laws. So in our review, it would have already been reviewed. So as an administrator in a local district to review, we would want to have faith that the law is being followed in order to adopt that assessment that's been vetted prior to that coming to the local district. So I'm not under the impression that the RSA has changed, which it has not. So the assessment that's been adopted would follow the regulations of the law that are already in place for what can be provided. So I see the correlation right there. So to review the assessment itself, we're only privy to the questions that have been provided in the pilot, if you will, at this point, compared to seeing the entire test to review those questions. So I'm under the impression that we're following the law, and I'm sure that's what's happening.
Well, I'm sure that you are following the law, but the school district has made it pretty clear that they don't want, the original Smarter Balance testing was supposedly contained all kinds of personal information that was gonna be very upsetting to children having to answer, you know, about their household, living conditions, so on and so forth. And I personally don't think that has anything to do with education, and I don't think it should be asked. I think that to me, if it's a mandatory testing, it should be nothing other than to be testing where the kids are academically, so that they can just be fit into another statistic. I personally don't believe in all those tests. I feel that the school district and the teachers that they have that should be enough. I don't like statistics.
I think that there were some statutes already in place, and the new bill that was passed this year will help to make sure those types of information is not gathered during the assessment. It's been an ongoing effort to try and see from Smarter Balance, because they're just doing the field test, you know, starting a month ago. What information is the student going to have to enter into the online system so that we can validate, is Johnny sitting at that keyboard taking that test?
Mm-hmm.
So from my understanding is that we have gotten information from Smarter Balanced as to that verification process. That was built into the law that was passed. So I am hopeful that that will resolve that concern on an ongoing basis, but you know, I'll be watching closely next spring.
Can you give us an example of how the staff that took the Smarter Balance test over in Nashua, that they were concerned with what their concerns were?
I just have a couple of quotes. The letter from the principal is like 3 pages long. I can forward that to your board. The paragraph that I had copied from the teachers union in Nashua, one paragraph said, "Most disconcerting, however, is the developmental appropriateness of the questions found within the Smarter Balanced assessment. The questions are confusing, poorly worded, obviously more designed for adult learners rather than for children, and overly tedious and cumbersome. As teachers in various Nashua schools completed a Smarter Balanced assessment practice test, they echoed again and again the question, what exactly is this test attempting to measure? As educators, we are not sure." So clearly Nashua has concerns, and the representative from Nashua, who I worked with closely, has echoed those concerns in the House of the state, and we're going to be following up on that, and you know, I would say without hesitation that there'll be additional legislation entered next year.
What time of year do they take these tests?
Spring.
In the spring. And do we have enough computer access for all of the kids to be taking the test all at the same time?
Not all at the same time. We develop a schedule because there's a window of testing, so we develop a schedule based on the availability of the computers. All school is technologically sound in the sense of being able to take the assessment.
So, spring of 2015
Correct.
is going to be the first time that this has ever been done, correct?
As a statewide assessment, correct.
Priscilla?
Glenn, who developed the Smarter Balance test?
I believe for the most part, they contracted with a third party to do most of the development work. And I I get confused whether it was Park Assessment Consortium or Smarter Balance that used a company called Achieve Incorporated. And the other one, the acronym is AIR, A-I-R, and I forget what the acronym stands for, but they were involved with one of the consortium as well.
Were these educators?
I'll say yes, but whether they were experienced in developing assessments, I don't have that answer. I would hope so.
Thank you.
Go ahead, ma'am.
So you guys voted it down, but we're still doing it?
No, we rejected Common Core,
And you're doing the
but now we're being told by the state of New Hampshire that we have to do the Smarter Balanced Assessment. And that's where the problem lies. Number one, the FERPA laws, I don't know if any of you are familiar with those, but the FERPA laws have been changed to allow for the data mining within the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Well,
You're talking about the disposition side of the testing.
FERPA is the Federal Education Protection Act, and those regulations were greatly loosened in 2008 and 2011. It has been a concern in relation to the state database, in relation to any consortium doing assessments. I think with legislation that we did pass this year, a lot of those concerns have been eased in my mind, but there will certainly be more legislation introduced next year, and I have a running list of bills that I'm going to introduce in relation to that.
Michael, could you possibly explain that, how you think that it can be successful in the building for the purpose that it needs to be?
In what way?
The Smarter Balance can run successfully with the vigilance of the staff that we have in place to protect the children's privacy, and that we're really not gonna know what it is until after we take it.
Correct.
It's just like everything else that's new. There's pros and cons to everything, and the weights and measures that go along with trying something new and being flexible and open, because just because it's new doesn't mean it's bad, but just because it's new doesn't mean it's gonna work. So I think that it's gonna have to take an initial go at it, knowing, I think our administration and our staff knows how absolutely important it is to protect our children's privacy and the family's privacy of the children that we represent and the families we represent. But also, if it's replacing a test that a test that we already take for assessment.
But that's the point. There's far too many assessments, as far as I'm concerned, and not enough educating. Who were the assessments? I can't believe that the number of assessments. Now, we just had a professional development committee meeting last week, and for a teacher to be evaluated as distinguished, they need to give more than 4 assessments a year, and there was discussion that one of the assessments will be given 3 times a year. So you're possibly talking about 7 assessments in one school. How many assessments do we need, and how does 4 or more assessments help the children? This is not helping the children. This is helping all the people down in Washington, D.C. This doesn't help the children. And as far as I'm concerned, this is far too overreaching, because once again, just as the federal government is listening to all our phone calls and reading all our emails. The federal government wants to document from room to tomb. They want to know what we're all doing. And as far as I'm concerned, parents need, the state is saying that you need to take this. Well, while your child is under the age of 18, you are the legal authority. And if the state of New Hampshire is saying that you're not, then your children belong to the state. And that I have a problem with. So opt your children out of the smarter, put it in writing, opt them out of the smarter balanced assessments, and make sure it gets into the school.
So we can still do that.
Well, they're saying you can't, but as far as I'm concerned, as a parent, if the state of New Hampshire tells me that my kid is going to do this, and my child is under the age of 18, I'm the legal authority for that child, not the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah, we've done some of the pilot testing, and it was like a whole page math problem, and it was like you could have possible answers, and then you got points for the answers. It was pretty complex. We were in the kitchen one night, probably for like 25 minutes in that one math problem. And it's what he does for work. We both came up with different answers, and we both got a different amount of points for our answers. But his wasn't every, it was like we wanted 4 or 5 answers for the one problem, and you got certain points. He didn't even get all the points. And it was like 4th grade. And we looked at some of the other questions, and I don't know my kid's doing it, so I'll let him know. I'd like to get more info and be able to view the tests ahead of time and kind of see what's going on, because some of the teachers that I've talked to that have taken it will be like a whole story. It'll be like an astronaut talking on the computer, and then it will answer questions. But you want to like review what the astronaut said. So she's like, I wonder if I could go back. And she did and was able to replay it. But she's wondering, is a 2nd grader going to be able to think, can I go back and read through the story again, or do I just have to answer it? Because it's like on a different screen.
Right.
So I think there needs to be more feedback.
But that's the problem. The parents are not getting the information. If this was such a great standards and great assessments, why are they not rolling out the red carpet with the bells and the whistles and saying, here you go, this is great? But this is now, we have just recently learned that they started implementing this in 2010. How much information as parents have received on the Common Core and the Smarter Balanced Assessment since 2010 from the New Hampshire Department of Education, administration, the U.S. Department of Education? How much information have they offered in the last 4 years? That's how much. 0. There's a reason why they're not offering any information and why they're trying to slide this through the back door without public input. Yes, that's a red flag, and I have a problem with it.
Yeah, they know better.
Go ahead, Gordon.
If I could just add, certainly communication across the board has not been what it should be from the federal or state level, and I think our commissioner certainly indicated or confirmed that to the House Education Committee, that communication was not good. I talked with the chairman of the Board of Education Monday night, and I told him about a bill that I had defeated this year, and he seemed to agree with it. And I'm going to be reintroducing it next year. But any new standards, science, social studies, etc., 3 things. There has to be an evaluation comparing that standard with the current New Hampshire standards and other recognized leading standards in the United States. Do a comparison. Provide that to every school district. 2, a fiscal analysis. What is the implementation of these standards going to cost New Hampshire and our school districts? And 3, the Board of Education has to have a public hearing in each executive council district, because the parents have a right to know what's going on, as do the board members have a right to know what's going on.
Exactly. And went off. Go ahead, Rose.
Is the Board of Education elected officials or are they appointed officials?
State Board of Education is appointed.
So do they take an oath, the same oath that
I
we elected
believe so,
officials?
yes. And actually, there was just 2 weeks ago, a new appointment to the Board of Education. Very controversial appointment. Yes. And he got by on a 3-2 vote from the Executive Council, because the Executive Council, 5 members, have to vote on any appointment of that level.
So if,
Is that a party line vote?
Yes, it was.
if they're taking these positions and they're taking an oath, and do they not understand their state constitution demands that they protect their sovereignty?
Well, personally, I wish our House of Representatives would pay a little bit more attention to the Constitution sometimes myself.
Anybody else have any questions?
I-
Lena?
On the assessments, do they hold the students responsible for knowing the material, or are these assessments to hold the teachers accountable for teaching these students per year, per session, per quarter, whatever your proficiency is going to be for each?
Good question.
Ongoing.
Good question.
And
That's
what was the
been.
RSA that you guys were quoting?
193.
Uh,
I gave it to you earlier.
193 C6 and 193 E5.
Certainly, the students are held accountable. Right now, there is no direct link between the assessments and teacher evaluations for the next 2 years. I think that's correct. In other states, they've already linked to different degrees the assessments to the teacher evaluations. In New York, for instance, it was, I'm not sure, I think it was close to 100% of teacher evaluations was related to the assessment that was just given, and test scores went down 30% in New York State. And so it's not just parents, but it's teachers, principals, everybody is marching on Albany in New York State.
So unless the federal law changes, we're doing it with those other 4 options that you gave left.
And those options will just be presented this summer to the U.S. Department of Education. They, I see no way that they will impact the spring of 2015.
Michael?
And the information I've given to the board in your packet, that we tabled that to the next meeting about what was discussed around the submittal of the second waiver for ESEA. I also want to make it very clear that regardless of what option a district might opt into presented in the waiver, Smarter Balanced is still part of all of those options. You still have to take Smarter Balanced within any of the options that are decided upon. So it's going to be given regardless of what option.
Priscilla?
Does Smarter Balance have the same requirement as No Child Left Behind as far as having, I believe it's 85% participation in order to go to school?
I'm not sure about that.
Laura, I see your hand up.
Yep. Will the parents be notified that the testing's coming up?
No.
Make sure your child have a good night's sleep and eat their breakfast before school
Yeah, they
and
are.
all that.
Yeah.
So that as soon as you get that, then you immediately will have to write a letter, because there's like no permission slip for this kind of testing. Correct?
There-
Yeah, that's
There
what
isn't a process in place to opt out.
There-
Again,
there is-
there isn't a policy for opting out, again, because according to law, all students take them. So whether you write a letter to opt out, I mean, that's your choice as a parent. However, I personally won't support anything that goes against the law. itself, just so you know.
There's no provision in the statutes for any kind of opt-out from these
Correct.
assessments.
But what about,
Well, I saw Priscilla, I'm sorry, Priscilla.
So if a parent does not want their child to take that test, you're saying that they're gonna take it anyway?
I can't make a child take a test.
Right, so
No.
I mean, even though it's not policy and it's against the state law, if a parent does not want their child to take that test, they don't take the test.
My point is that I will not promote an opt-out process because it does, in my opinion, does not follow the law, and I will follow the law to the T.
Good.
well, as far as personal information goes, is what's entered into the computer, will we be able to know what is going to be entered in about our child for the test? Because, I mean, I think that would only be fair.
If I could just answer to the best of my knowledge in that regard. I was told by one representative where they did the field test that a student was given an assigned number to use when logging in to take the test. And the teacher proctoring the exam, let's say, then wrote down the student's name next to that number to establish that link between the student and the number. But the only thing entered into the SBAC, the Smarter Balance test, was this number.
Okay.
That's my understanding from one person.
Yeah.
Sandy?
So the Smarter Balance testing, is that aligned with the Common Core stuff? Is that all Common Core stuff?
Yes,
So if we don't do Common Core, won't we fail the test?
we,
We may.
we're,
We're doing same, yeah, we're already doing there.
the Smarter Balance is based on Common Core state standards, and the board recently has rejected that, and we're developing curriculum around the old Massachusetts standards prior to Massachusetts adopting Common Core. So the standards that we're developing curriculum around are not the standards that are going to be assessed through Smarter Balanced. So we'll have to see what those results look like.
So you're saying we're doing the Massachusetts standards or we're not?
We're currently developing curriculum based on the Massachusetts standard. However, in the past, we've been developing curriculum based on Common Core until the most recent vote.
But we still have to do the testing.
Correct.
And now the Smarter Balanced assessments are not compatible with our local standards.
Okay, so we might not necessarily do as well on them as other
Correct.
districts.
Or you may be
My
better.
problem with the data money thing
Or them
is
kids might excel. You
Yeah.
don't really know.
Like I've had, one of my teacher, customers is a reading specialist down in southern New Hampshire, and she took the assessment. And she said that she thinks her kids are not gonna do well on it. And I said, well, how do you think that's gonna make them feel? And she, was just like, wow. So, it's, the testing itself is challenging. And I've heard it from like 5 or 6 teachers. And I think if more people could take some sample testings and kind of look at, the possible answers, it's kind of subjective. So.
Laura?
For each individual child that takes this test, how does it impact their life and their education? What good is it?
The assessment itself, or any assessment that you give a student, is to identify what their strengths and weaknesses are. So the information that comes out of the state assessment or our local assessments gives us that information as educators to determine how we should develop the lessons and deliver the curriculum in order to address their weaknesses and work on their strengths.
For each individual child?
Each individual child, and I'm a big advocate for looking at each individual child and what their strengths and weaknesses are.
So as a district, every child that takes this test, the district will get all the results for each individual child. And then the following year, after you've got those results, that will make no difference because you're taking them in the spring and that's the end of the school year, you know? So it isn't gonna really, I don't like all this testing. It to me is such a waste of time. These teachers have enough to do in the course of a day, and lose a lot of teaching time every day. We need to get back to the basics instead of all this hoopla. I don't know. I think it's a waste of time, but
Have you met Steve
I'm just
Brown?
a grandmother. I know we've been taking tests. I took the tests, filling the little bubbles all those years. It didn't do anything, you know. And how do I know that this is really going to make any kind of a change? You know?
No one knows, because there's no, this is brand new. There's no data, there's no assessments on the Common Core or the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Nobody knows. The children now, they're using our children as guinea pigs. Because no one can tell you, this is all brand new. And why are they not telling people? That's a red flag.
Well, I am amazed that we have as many computers available in our little school for all the kids to be able to take the tests on the computers. So I know you're gonna have to do scheduling, but it's all gonna be like in the same week for the whole school?
12 weeks.
12-week period.
12 weeks?
Well, not for each kid, it's gonna spread out.
Right.
It's only 6 weeks for each kid.
I'm sorry, I saw the young lady over here first.
EDIS test, because some of the kids that don't have iPads at home aren't going to necessarily do as good as the kids that use iPads every day at home.
We're not looking to administer the assessment on tablets.
No, I know, but, you're not? Okay. It's going to be on regular computers.
Correct. Laptops or desktops.
Yeah, but still, there are some kids that don't have as much interaction with even those as that parents have all that stuff. They have laptops in the bedroom and they want. And then second too, private schools don't have to do the assessments.
Correct.
And Maggie Hasson's children go to Phillips Exeter Academy, right?
Go ahead, Bill.
I hate to go against the time, and there's too many tests. I get that whole 7 testing is too much, but doesn't everybody need to have a test in the school to make sure things are getting met? I mean, not 7 tests, but you need to know that your school's a good school, that the kids are meeting at least a minimum education requirement, that they are learning. And you can't do that by being a parent. I mean, I know what kids learning this year. I look at their homework and I'm on it, but you still don't know that they're meeting the minimum that the state says, hey, everybody needs to know this by 3rd grade. So testing isn't all bad. You know, we've been taking them for years. It's just a matter of, I understand the personal information, looks like they're covering it. Wouldn't want them to take 7 tests a year because it takes up teacher time. But we do need to know that the kids are being educated to a certain degree. So we have to take a test anyway. There's got to be a test.
But there's far too many.
Yeah, 7 is too many. Maybe one at the end of the year, every year would be fine, or twice a year. 7 is too many, but we do need to know. I mean, we've had great teachers. We've been lucky. But, you know, we want to know that we don't just like them, that they're doing a good job as well, comparatively to the rest of the state and the rest of the country.
Well,
now I'm gonna forget my question. You talked for too long.
No, sure.
You said over 12 weeks. So is it each grade level is the testing a week? Do we know
We haven't
that?
developed that schedule at this point, but it's grades 3 through 8. Would
And
be
you've got
administered
it
the test.
scheduled for 12 weeks.
We have that window to test. Doesn't mean that we'll take all 12 weeks to run the whole school through the assessment.
Smarter Balanced has created that 12-week window, and that's when the online test will be available for that 12-week period.
well,
Is it the school district's ability to command the testing schedule? I mean, could the school board say, we'd like to see 1 test within the first month of coming back to school for all the students, and then a second test at the end of the school year. Is that something that?
No, the state assessed at the same time every year, and they give you a window to assess the students, but you develop the schedule locally.
This is only one, we're talking about Smarter Balanced as one assessment per year.
Correct.
It's any other assessments are local options.
assessments.
So I guess that's part of my question, is if we came up with something that we wanted to see, and it basically said where the kids are at when they're coming in for that new school year, and where they're at when they're going out, so.
And we would, we're fortunate next year that we'll have NWEA testing coming back to Paul's school, and that gives us a fall assessment result and a spring assessment result, so you see the growth from fall to spring, where the point was made with the state assessments given in the spring and that's given in the next spring, so you would hope to see that full year worth of growth. However, there's the time in the summer when they're not in school we have to take into consideration. With our local assessment, we'll have a fall score and a spring score, so we can see the growth in between, and we have an option for in between as well for students that we feel might not be making progress.
So,
On the Smarter Balance testing, is that immediate results like the MIWA? Or is it like No Child Behind where you have to wait for months before you get the results?
It's going to be a lot quicker than the kneecap results. And one, to my mind, controversial part of both assessment consortiums is, and especially Smarter Balanced, they're moving toward automated scoring. So a lot of these questions where it may be a little bit subjective in the future is going to be scored by computer and artificial intelligence rather than a person.
And we're talking about the assessments, the number of assessments and taking teacher time. I don't think that even is close to the amount of time it's taking teachers to compile that data and read that data and decide what that data means. That's got to be hours and hours.
Wayne, I see your hand up?
No, Ralph answered it.
Okay.
I didn't know.
You did.
Anybody else? Laura?
I would just like to thank the board and administration for the opportunity. I know that you can ask questions, come to school board meetings, etc., but I think this forum was a nice idea with a structured agenda, and I encourage you to do it more often.
Fine.
And I would just like to echo those comments. I wish more boards would hold a public forum and have as much feedback with parents as I've seen the few times I've been here. And also, I'd just like to remind all of you that this is an election year, and you should be questioning all the candidates about their views on education and some of the things we've talked tonight about, because it's vitally important in where we're headed.
That it?
I also want to thank the board, and I think we should give them a round of applause for having this forum.
Well, I'd also like to extend that to Representative Cordelli for taking his time out of his busy schedule. I appreciate you coming, Glenn.
Sure.
And thank you for being here, too.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's encouraging to see everybody show up.
Thank you,
Take a
Glenn.
recess to go into non-public.
Yes. Well, we're gonna have to vote on that.
You're laughing, you make me laugh.
Thanks for taking it.
I know, but like you couldn't tell, I'm laughing, cracking up. I know. No, I mean,
Do you have anything on the non-public? No.